Ever since a young age, I always enjoyed attention. Anytime my mother whipped out a camera, I struck a pose or created a comical face so I could hear the laughs from friends and the sighs from my mom or dad. I enjoyed hearing my parents' exasperated remarks as they would say, "Oh, that's just Sid being Sid." As I grew older into elementary school and middle school, nothing much changed. For every speech or project, I was consistently the first student to shoot her hand up in the air and wave it around frantically so I could present my work first. I loved the feeling of standing in front of my peers speaking confidently for all to hear, even though most probably were not even paying attention. As I was growing in my communication skills in my other classes, my confidence was shrinking because of an anxiety problem I had in my band class, performer's anxiety. In my middle school band, I played clarinet. When I picked up the instrument for the first time, I fell in love with the ways the keys felt when I pushed them down and the warm sound it produced. I loved it so much that I practiced every day for 3 hours. My teacher began to notice that my musical skills were growing quickly, but she was disappointed that there was one aspect hindering me, and that was the nervousness I had performing on the instrument. For every playing test, which was where you played a scale or a piece of music in front of the whole class, I trembled violently, and my breathing became short and shallow. Only a couple of sentences Marcus, a public speaking author, describes in this form of anxiety. One time, I even had a nosebleed in front of the class. This did not help at all. As I entered high school, nothing much changed. My high school band director assigned me as principal clarinet player in the Wind Symphony since my freshman year, a high honor, but he recognized that I was struggling playing in front of the class. "You sound flawless in the practice rooms," he said to me once, "but something is happening to your tone and confidence when you know someone else is listening." In frustration to his comment, I went home and practiced, even though it never seemed to make a difference. At the beginning of my senior year, also the beginning of marching band season, my band director approached me. "For our show this year, I am having you play a solo at Grand Nationals." In marching band world, Grand Nationals is the marching band competition that attracts approximately 25,000 audience members per show. In that moment, I couldn't help but think, you want me to play in front of 25,000 people when I can barely play in front of my own parents? But instead I spat out the words, "Sure thing." Prepared for my answer, he smiled and whipped out a book, handed it to me, and walked away. "The Inner Game of Music," it read. It was a book about overcoming performance anxiety. Motivated more than ever to do well, I started reading the book when I got home. I had no idea that performers' anxiety was a real problem people suffer. I thought it was one of those things kids just grow out of. Barry Green, the author, described how adults who play as musicians often use quick fixes, such as drinking a shot of alcohol or taking medications, was an effective way to overcome the anxiety. Knowing that I did not want to go down that route, I kept reading along. The book described performers' anxiety as a strong mental state of being, and that was all that one really needed to overcome in order to succeed. Through a process of writing down my fears and almost meditating, practicing with the band became easier, and I was constantly visualizing performing my solo in front of 25,000 people. Eventually, November 16th, 2010 arrived, and it was time to perform our show at the Colt Stadium in Indianapolis. As our band entered the football stadium, the stuffy uniform and blaring lights caused an overwhelming sensation. As I stood in my position where I would start the show, my heart started thumping to where I was sure the audience would hear that over my playing. The show started, and all was going well, and my time to play the solo was approaching. I advanced to the front sidelines where my microphone was set up, and I closed my eyes. I pictured myself in a bubble and ignored the extra noise from the audience, and then I played. The music flowed out of my clarinet and my heart stopped thumping. I was really doing this. When the solo ended, applause came from the audience and I could not help but not want it to end. Once again, I was my elementary school self, wanting the attention from the audience and their applause once again. And with a large grin on my face, I could imagine my mom saying, "That's just Sid being Sid."
It's you make me sing. Your every line, your every word, your everything.